And let's go to this conversation now. Business Leadership South Africa is asking the South African government for clarity on the country's exact position on the war in Russia and Ukraine. Now, the body is criticizing what it calls a relaxed position about neutrality and being non-aligned as Russia-Ukraine conflict rages on. Busisiwe Mavuso is the Chief Executive Officer of Business Leadership South Africa and joins us live now. Busi, thank you so much for stepping out of the meeting and thank you for giving us your time this evening. Do appreciate it. Let's start with, the statement from last week. I mean, we saw what the BLSA was lamenting as, the nonchalant stance of government on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We also saw communication from DERCO over the weekend, a briefing as well on this particular issue, given what has also been happening in terms of those allegations from the United States ambassador. Now, South Africa continues to say that it's sticking to its foreign policy and remains neutral. In your view, it doesn't sound like it's enough.
It doesn't even sound like we are being neutral. And good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. Because if we are claiming a non-alignment stance, non-alignment certainly does not mean what we are doing. We are conducting joint military operations with Russia. That doesn't scream non-alignment. The visit last year of Russian Foreign Affairs Minister does not scream non-alignment. The prospect of a visit by President Putin in August doesn't scream non-alignment. And our voting on UN resolutions related to Ukraine have all served to make our stance appear decidedly in favor of Russia. There are currently reports that the commander of the South African Ground Forces, Lieutenant General Mbata, has led a delegation to Russia that is discussing issues relating to military cooperation. All of that does not scream non-alignment. And I think this is precisely what we are calling for, because the decisions that government is making at the moment is actually very problematic. They are problematic from an economic growth perspective. They are problematic from a financial markets perspective. I think we have seen what the rand has done. The collapse of the rand ever since this thing happened and the US ambassador came out last week is rather problematic. We are not only going to ruin our relationship with the US, but with Europe as well as with the broader allies of Ukraine. So we therefore need to come out in a clear position in terms of what really happened and give clarity and evidence to that extent. I'm afraid the government saying that they are going to set up a commission of inquiry is not good enough, because how long is that going to take? And by the time the report comes out, we are not going to have an economy to salvage. The rand would have collapsed further and more damage would have been done to our economy. So that is the stance of business. Government is really going to have to give this matter serious and urgent attention, and it doesn't seem like their response at the moment is really taking this matter seriously.
How much of a concern is it, though, for business that at this stage we're still waiting to see what tangible proof the United States is going to produce in this regard?
And I guess if you are being accused of something as dire than what we are actually being accused of, I think the onus maybe is on you, if you are really innocent, to say that here's the evidence that I actually did not do anything wrong. But I guess US accusation or not, I think what business is calling for is that whether the US had raised this or not, the Simonstown episode has needed an explanation ever since it took place. Even if arms were not loaded onto the ships, the fact that it docked at all, particularly in a military facility with its transponder turned off, was ill-advised. It is now imperative that government needs to clear up this mess and provide an explanation. We need a clear explanation of who authorized the docking and what was offloaded and loaded. We need to understand the full chain of command. If laws were broken, there should be arrests and prosecutions. This needs to happen immediately before irreversible damage is done, and not months down the line when an inquiry concludes. Governments need to make clear whether an export permit had been granted to supply arms to Russia. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation said that the National Convention Arms and Control Committee has no record of an approved arms sale to Russia. This means that if arms were loaded that day in Simonstown, it was done illegally. So BLSA is therefore calling on government to take a clear position on arms trade with Russia, as other non-aligned countries like China have done. So I think that is the clarity that is provided. Never mind what the US is saying. We should have actually been transparent about what really happened in Simonstown in December 2022.
And going back to, your earlier point, the SANDF development, yesterday in a statement, they say that, they do have these bilaterals with various countries. It is not only Russia. And this has been a long-standing kind of like appointment, if I can even put it in inverted commas. It's been a long-standing visit that needed to take place. It's only just that we are now seeing it unfold now with the midst of what is going on. I suppose then, if I'm listening to you, you potentially would agree with those who say that they should have possibly postponed?
I guess that really would have been proper, because I think what is at risk here is that the US and European markets are particularly important for our manufactured goods, the kind that sees far more value added within our borders. For example, 71% of vehicle exports so far this year have gone to Europe, and 15% have gone to the US. More than a third of our exports go to America and Europe, and 37% of our imports come from there. A loss of these trade relations would be devastating for employment, leaving our economy far more reliant on raw materials exports to other developing countries. We are already seeing, as I've said, major ructions on our financial markets. Look at what the South African government bonds have done. They've seriously been hit hard ever since this allegation came out, which means that it's substantially going to be more expensive for government to roll over its growing debt obligations. And it means we are going to pay more as a country to service our debts, which means it's going to leave less available to the fiscus to fund important public services. That is what is at stake here. And that is what the South African government needs to be protecting, and that's why I'm saying that maybe the onus is on us to actually come up with proof that we actually have not done anything wrong. We stand to lose AGOA. That is 290 billion worth of exports to the US. At least that is the number in 2021. And I think according to that agreement, it clearly says that you cannot threaten U.S. national security interests. And if the U.S. for whatever reason feels threatened, then they've got all the right to actually withdraw AGOA. And where does that leave South Africa? But you see, it's not only AGOA that is at risk here. It's probably not going to stop there. We also have a free trade agreement with the European Union that could be at risk, and trade relations will be affected with the UK. So we therefore need to think more broadly, than this ping pong and thinking that this is a U.S. issue. It's not a U.S. issue. We have counterparts that were actually in France 3 days ago, and they're talking about how the international community is frowning upon what South Africa is accused of doing, and we are not, providing any shred of evidence. Our CEOs are having to face tough questions from the international community and their international principals in terms of what exactly happened. Why don't we clarify our stance? And why are we not taking this matter urgently? We have said as a country that we're trying to get foreign direct investment to the tune of 2 trillion rands. Where is that going to come from if the international community loses confidence in South Africa because of its actions in as far as Russia is concerned? So I think from where we are sitting as South Africa, we actually have more to lose. And I think as business, we are simply saying, can we clarify this mess so that South Africa is not plunged further into the economic erosion that we've actually seen ever since the state capture project, and worse off, the economic erosion and the rand collapse that has happened at least in the past few days ever since this has taken place.
And I'm keen to hear your thoughts on the school of thought, though, because there are others who are saying that we are being bullied.
That is precisely, and I don't know what being bullied means here, because I think when I listened to the US ambassador, he was saying we are not telling South Africa what to do or what not to do. We are merely saying you have taken a non-alignment stance, but your actions do not scream non-alignment. So what does bullying, or where does bullying come in as far as that is concerned? Because you have taken a particular position, which is non-alignment, and you are clearly not doing what other countries who have taken a non-alignment position are doing. And I've just articulated what other countries are not doing who have taken a non-alignment stance. I've at least counted 5 incidences that scream, alignment, and that scream, decidedly in favor of Russia. So it is not being bullied. I think it is just the US and other countries seeking clarity on the South African position, and I think business is seeking that clarity as well.
And Busi, before I let you go, please allow me to, get your thoughts on this one, because, it's something that you were also watching as a board member at some point at Eskom. Today we saw the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, talking about former Eskom CEO Andre de Ruyter, saying that he doesn't know whether he was there to, write a book, or was he there to perform his duties. At the same time, talking about him as a lone ranger at some point and all of that. And this, of course, is all encapsulated around this particular intelligence report that he says he only saw a draft of and doesn't have the final copy. What were your thoughts, firstly, when you saw what was unfolding in Parliament?
Look, I think the unfortunate thing about this intelligence report and everything that is actually happening, I did not look at what was happening at Parliament, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think my thoughts are that we are clear that the intelligence report or not, Eskom is the single biggest threat that we have in the economy. It is not only a single biggest threat, it is an existential crisis and an existential threat to the South African economy. And we are worried that the way in which this matter is being looked at, it unfortunately seeks to exonerate people who should not be exonerated. I really think that instead of the ping pong that is currently happening, we should be looking at the allegations that have been leveled against Eskom and try to get to the bottom of it. If there are allegations that the supply chain has been captured, if there are allegations that R1 billion is leaking in the system, if there are allegations that Eskom employees and Eskom contractors are colluding, to rob not just Eskom, but the 65 million South Africans, if there are allegations, that the stage 6 load shedding that we're currently sitting in, which makes it impossible for business to do what it needs to do, is because of, orchestrated actions, by some people. We need to be looking at that. I really think that we are derailing and we are having the wrong conversation as a country. Let's actually look at this report. And it's interesting for me. I thought when Parliament called for an ad hoc committee, you see, if you want to set up a committee, you should set up a committee for Eskom, not for Russia, or rather for this lady Arship. Set up a committee to look into these allegations and come up with a report. Because instead of saying Andra was right or this one was wrong or whatever the case is, let's get to the bottom of the problem. What exactly is happening at Eskom? What is causing this load shedding? And are we leaking R1 billion, per month? And unfortunately, we'll never know, because when this was tabled in Parliament, apparently the ANC stopped the committee from being set up, and it voted against it. Now, as South Africa, we will never know the truth. It's going to be Andre's word against my word, against the minister's word, against the board's word, which is actually a useless exercise, because I thought that we had agreed as a country that Eskom is very important. And I think allegations like this are indeed very worrying. And I don't think that they are entirely false.
In your view, then, where is this report? Because Parliament still says it doesn't have it. The minister says he doesn't have the final report. It doesn't look like anyone has it. And now there's suggestion that the former Eskom CEO may have it, and there's concerns that he wasn't fully vetted. So where is this report?
Well, according to the Eskom CEO, the report was given to Sydney Mufamadi. The report was given to the NPA. The report was given to SIU. The report was given to the police. But, you know, the other interesting thing in this is that, I don't know if you remember the State of the Nation address, you know, when the president actually spoke to us, he actually made mention of this report. So it's interesting that he will quote a report that no government official conveniently has ever seen. The president, in his own words, said, the South African Police Service has established a dedicated team with senior leadership to deal with the pervasive corruption and the theft at several power stations that has contributed to the poor performance of these stations. And he goes on to say, intelligence-driven operations at Eskom-related sites have so far resulted in 43 arrests. So if this was acknowledged at the State of the Nation address and we were given a report in terms of what these intelligence-driven operations have produced, on what basis was this, or where was this quoted from? Or on what basis was this actually quoted from, if no one in government all of a sudden knows about this report? So someone is sitting with the report. I don't think that anyone is obviously at the moment coming out to say that they've seen the report or not. Hence, I'm saying that all of this is a useless exercise. Let's set up a committee which is going to look into these allegations, and let's get to the bottom of who exactly is guilty and who's responsible for the demise at Eskom, because definitely someone is responsible for leaking the billion rands per month, as the CEO has actually alleged.
It's going to be interesting what happens here. I know I borrowed you from a meeting and you've got to go back, but thank you so much for your time. Do appreciate it this evening. That is Busisiwe Mavuso. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Business Leadership South Africa. Quite a lot of, talk around the Russia-Ukraine story, at the same time what is happening in Parliament. So let's see what becomes of the installments in these two particular stories.